From Badgerland, where it is frigid indeed, my friends. Frigid, 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 and getting worse. Tomorrow, -10? Yikes. Kurt Berglund with you with another Pine Tar Great Team Set briefing. Today, the 1964 Philadelphia Phillies, winners of 92 games in the 1964 regular season, winners of the team set poll that we did for the franchise of the Phillies. The most popular team voted that was a Phillies team in that poll. The 64 Phillies did not finish in the top 5 and therefore was not a guarantee to make the set, but we needed a team from Philadelphia, I thought, and the best one was the most popular one, and that one was the 64 Phillies. It was also nice that it also gave me a fourth team from the 1960s, as the poll took us from 1964 to 1989, and I wanted at least 4 teams from the 60s. We got it with the 64 Phillies. Before we go into the details of this famous team, very good team, let's look at the lineups. Gene Mauch, of course, famous for using multiple lineups on multiple occasions for multiple reasons. These were 2 of the popular ones for him in 1964. Versus lefties, Tony Taylor at second base, John Callison in right, Richie Allen at third, Roy Sievers at first, Tony Gonzalez in center, Danny Cater in left, Gus Triandos at catcher, and Bobby Wine at short. Against righties, Tony Gonzalez in center, Richie Allen at third, John Callison in right, Wes Covington in left, Clay Dalrymple at catcher, Frank Thomas, no, not that Frank Thomas. This one was a slugging outfielder with the Mets before he got to Philadelphia. He also played with the Braves and some others. Batting 6th at first, Tony Taylor batting 7th at second, and Ruben Amaro at shortstop. As I've learned in doing this project, there are multiple pieces to every great team. And every great team has chinks in the armor. Something about them that's a little bit weak that they have to overcome to achieve greatness. The thing that I like about Pine Tar Baseball, one of the things I like about Pine Tar Baseball so much, is that you're going to have to figure out a way to get around that with every one of these 16 great teams. No great team is invincible, and especially with the home road splits for pitching, you're going to have to overcome that, and they're going to have to win despite those obstacles. Having said that, let's talk about the 1964 Philadelphia Phillies, and you know much of this information. Again, 92-70 was their record. They were tied at the end for second place with the Cincinnati Reds, 1 game back of the 1964 St. Louis Cardinals, who went on to beat the New York Yankees in 7 games in the 1964 World Series. They were in second place. They were 2 games ahead of the 1964 San Francisco Giants, a team riddled with team dissension and problems, but loaded with talent. Many of the problems have been chronicled for the 64 Giants as being race-related, and that if they could have overcome those, they certainly had enough talent to win the pennant in 64. So we have 4 very good teams clustered at the top: the Cardinals, the Reds, the Phillies, the Giants, and the Braves not too far behind. Lost in the discussion, of course, are the Los Angeles Dodgers of 1964, who had a horrible start and never recovered. The 64 Phillies had an 8-2 start to their season. They led until the third week of September. They led from opening day to the third week of September. On September 1st, they held a 5.5 game lead over the Cincinnati Reds, who were at that time in second place. On September 12th, they were 6.5 game. 1 week later, with 25 to play, they were 6.5 up. 10 days after that, 12 games to play, they were still 6.5 up with 12 to play. On September 21st, the game that Dick Allen says was the beginning of the end, he says, and his famous quote about this is, "The play broke our humps." In the 6th inning against the Reds, Art Mahaffey on the mound, Chico Ruiz on third base with 1 out, and Frank Robinson at the plate. Chico Ruiz noticed that Mahaffey did not check him at third base when he came to the belt to make the pitch home. He didn't look at third. On the next pitch, Ruiz stole home. Mahaffey threw his pitch. It was high. Dalrymple jumped for it. It got past him, and Ruiz was able to steal home famously with Frank Robinson at the plate in a scoreless, meaningful, big game for the pennant race. So because he did this, this became known as the curse of Chico Ruiz for Phillies fans, and keyed what Dick Allen thinks was the turning point in the pennant race. All right, much of this can be chronicled for you if you're interested in a book called The Year of the Blue Snow, which is a book put out by Saber about the 64 Phillies, and one that I use to help me put the team together for the great team set. Now let's talk about Gene Mauch. Gene Mauch was a very brilliant, I think we can say, baseball manager. He took on some of the most challenging teams in baseball history, including the expansion 1969 Expos, including I think we can say, floundering Minnesota Twins team in the mid-70s, and certainly took the California Angels to within 2 whiskers, both in 82 and 86, of the American League pennant, ultimately losing both American League Championship Series. In 64, Mauch was a younger manager, but as one of the things that I learned in creating cards, manager cards, for the Pine Tar set, is that managers don't really change their colors very much. The strategies that they use early on in their careers are ones that they continue to ride throughout. And this means for Gene Mauch that the 1964 Phillies were all about one-run strategies. They were about bunting, and they were about the hit and run, and they were about the intentional walk, certainly when necessary for Mauch. This team for Pine Tar in the Great Team set will be an interesting one and a fun one, I think, for you to manage. Why? For several reasons. One, Mauch platooned at really 5 different positions on the field. His starters in almost every game: Tony Taylor, Richie Allen, and John Callison. Taylor at second, Allen at third, Callison in right. Every other position, you could argue, was a platoon. Tony Gonzalez was pretty much platooned in center field with a few different folks, notably Cookie Rojas, who became famous later on with the Kansas City Royals. Rojas played 5 different positions for this team and was an important contributor. Left field, Wes Covington was the left-handed part of the platoon. Mock never really did have a right-handed part of the platoon that he was real comfortable with. Danny Cater got time there, so did Alex Johnson, who you probably both know both those names. First base, Roy Sievers was given up on during the early part of the season. I believe he was gone by June. Frank Thomas was acquired in July. John Hernstein played a lot of first base as well. This was not an offensive strength of the team. A little bit better against lefties than against righties, but not a strength. And the Phillies never really got it going at first base. You'll have to deal with that as you work with this team in a series or tournament or a season of these great teams. Clay Dalrymple was the left-handed part, and Triandos was the right-handed part of the catching tandem that Mock used. And shortstop was an offensive mess all year long as Mock bounced between Bobby Wine and Ruben Amaro, and really Wine, I guess, won the competition, but we're definitely talking about a shortstop position in the tradition of Del Maxville, Ray Euler, and I don't know, pick your other favorite 60s non-hitting shortstop, because you basically have 2 pitcher spots in the lineup, the shortstop hitting 8th and the pitcher hitting 9th, that Mock had to contend with. The pitching. Mock had 2 sore-armed starting pitchers down the stretch. Dennis Bennett and Ray Culp were basically unavailable in the month of September. Mahaffey and Rick Wise was a young, teenaged rookie. They were the 3rd and 4th starters, but Mock didn't really trust either one of them down the stretch, and so it all came down to Jim Bunning and Chris Short, men who pitched 2 times in the last 2 weeks on 2 days rest. I'll say that again. Short and Bunning. Bunning pitching a perfect game earlier in the season. Short and Bunning pitched twice on 2 days rest in the last 2 weeks of the season. The book that I showed you, The Year of the Blue Snow, goes into detail about why that happened, what Mock's options were. I'm not going to go into great detail about it. It's just that Mock didn't have confidence in Wise and didn't really have confidence in Mahaffey, who lost the famous game where Chico Ruiz stole home. So because of injury and because of a loss of confidence, Mock tried to ride 2 starters to the World Series, and it didn't work. He lost a 6.5 game lead with 12 to play. Now, Richie Allen's position on all of this is that this team was over its head all season long. That really it wasn't the best team in 1964. That there were other teams in the league, maybe more than one, that were better. And the bubble just burst in the last 2 weeks of the season, and they couldn't sustain what they had built any longer. We'll leave that for you to decide as you decide and you find out where the 64 Phillies match up against the other great teams in this set, the other 15 teams. I started this briefing by saying that the teams in the great team set all have weaknesses. They all have something they need to overcome. I think this team matches up well against many, maybe most of these great teams. Bunning was a phenomenal pitcher. Short was a great number 2. Richie Allen was the Rookie of the Year in 1964, and he was a monster. And his card in the great team set will reflect that. And a man I haven't really mentioned yet, Johnny Callison in right field, hit the home run that won the 1964 All-Star game and was a great, great player of the 60s. between Callison and Allen, you're going to score a lot of runs with this team. Tony Taylor, I think, was a very underrated second baseman in the 60s as well. You will score runs. You have a bullpen that will prevent runs. There are some good pitchers there. It's going to be very interesting to see where this team stacks up as you use this team in the Pine Tar Baseball Great Team set. I'm excited for you to get your hands on them and see what happens. All right. Check out Pine Tar Baseball at ttlbaseballgame.com. Look for the Great Team set coming soon. I have about 15, maybe 20 hours of work left to do on the set, and then it should be ready to go. I'm excited for you to get them. Stay tuned for more Great Team briefings, and I look forward to sharing all of this work that I've done with you. My health has been bad. I do apologize for that. I've had a bunch of family health problems to work through too, and I appreciate your patience in waiting for this set. I promise you it will be worth the wait. I'm Kurt Berglund. I hope you have a great day. So long, everybody.